Hello and welcome to the Scholar Spotlight video series hosted by the Data-Driven Decision-Making in Education Special Interest Group of the American Educational Research Association. My name is Kara Lasater, Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership at the University of Arkansas and co-manager of the SIG social media accounts. This month's Spotlight features Dr. Ellen Mandinach. Dr. Mandinach serves as Senior Research Scientist and Director of the Data for Decisions Initiative at West Ed. She has authored 5 books on data-driven decision-making, as well as numerous journal articles and technical reports. She is also the founding chair and current co-chair of the Data-Driven Decision-Making in Education SIG. And as such, it seems only fitting that our SIG's first ever Scholar Spotlight should highlight the work of Dr. Mandinach. Dr. Mandinach, thank you so much for participating in the Scholar Spotlight and providing an opportunity for all of us interested in educational data use to learn from you. I want to start our discussion today talking a little bit about your background and interest in data use. So to start off with, what led you to study educational data use?
Well, first of all, thank you, Kara, and thank you for all the work that you've done. Let me make one correction. As of Friday, my 7th book will be out and on data ethics. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Data have been at the forefront of education for a long time. And to me, it was sort of the reverse of the perfect storm of my background in measurement and instruction and teaching that all comes together around data-driven decision-making or data-informed decision-making, whatever. And about 20 years ago, it became obvious that data are here to stay. And we need to think about very broadly how educators are using data. Do they have the capacity? Do they have the technology to support such data use? Because the amount or the proliferation of data far surpasses the human memory capacity. So it gives a ripe venue in which researchers can work, practitioners can function, and policymakers can consider the appropriate and responsible use of data.
So for people who may not be familiar with your work, how would you describe the focus of your research?
I think it morphed. It began originally to look at and resonate to what was happening in the field. So originally it was, let's look at the technological solutions. And this was around 2003-04 as big data systems were coming to the fore. But realizing that having the technology infrastructure is inadequate, you need the human capacity infrastructure, which is then when we began looking very deeply at what does it mean for an educator to be data literate. And now, with what's happened in the past couple of years with the pandemic, recognizing that it's not, and the diversity of students, that it's not just about being data literate, but it's being culturally responsive data literate to address the whole child, the needs of every child from a continuous improvement standpoint, rather than data for accountability, which is where data-driven decision-making has always gotten a bad reputation. As research has shown, that the more data, accountability data being used, it marginalizes the most vulnerable populations. So looking at the work of like Amanda Datnow and Vicki Park, Melanie Bertrand, about the use of asset models, asset mindset, the whole child perspective, using diverse data sources. So my work has morphed with the needs of the field. And then most recently with the pandemic, of considering in hybrid solutions, virtual solutions, what is appropriate data use? What is responsible data use? How do we protect the rights of our students in either brick and mortar or in virtual settings? So the ethics around data. So it's a trajectory that I've seen my work all in response to what's happening in educational practice.
What do you feel like have been some of the most significant findings or interesting or exciting findings that have emerged from your career in research?
Well, I like to talk about both the challenges and opportunities, the chops, because you hope that the opportunities far outweigh the challenges. But in this case, I think the opportunity to have educators use appropriate data in a responsible manner is the ultimate goal. It's what all educators need and want to do. But the challenges and much of the early work was about implementation. What are the components of data out there? So the challenges have been great. And this is one of the reasons that we created the special interest group, to start to have conversations about what are the methodologies we need to apply? How do we have conversations with policymakers, with educational practitioners, with the technology people who are supplying apps, data systems, so that they understand the needs of educators and the kinds of data, and to protect the rights of the students through appropriate data privacy and data ethics. So to me right now, I think it's multifaceted. It's trying to get all educators to be data literate. I think it is a responsibility for every school district to onboard any educator and any staff member who has hands-on data to know how to use data properly. So that's about data literacy. For researchers to work with the technology solution folks to create something that technologies that are applicable from the most rural, smallest school district to the largest school districts, that are affordable solutions for using data, and to make sure that we're addressing the needs of all children through the idea that data are not just test scores. They are not just accountability measures that can shame and blame a child or an educator. To me, the most frustrating issue, at least in the United States, and this is not true internationally, is that the randomized controlled trials, the most rigorous studies that have been done to show that data use works, have had mixed results. And in part, it's because of the way they've been conducted and the outcome measures that are being used. Yet in other venues, like in Europe, in New Zealand, they're finding positive results. So I think we need to think about our mindset of what does that mean that data use does work.
Well, it sounds like there's lots of opportunities for the field moving forward, which is encouraging. You had mentioned, and this is something that I was really interested in learning more about, you had mentioned a little bit about the inception of our SIG. And so I'm interested in if you could just tell us a little bit about the history and progress of the SIG and why you felt like it was so important within the AERA community.
Well, first of all, I can't take full credit because one of my colleagues at WestEd, who's no longer there, came to me with the idea, and she started it, and then I finished it off because writing a proposal to get a special interest group approved through AERA is not trivial, and many get rejected. The genesis for me was that I saw my colleagues, myself, apply for AERA programs in, say, leadership or teaching or Division C, Division K, and they were getting rejected because the people who were reviewing it didn't think that it was mainstream enough for leadership or teaching or instruction or whatever. They didn't understand the field. So the creation of the special interest group gave us the venue to provide a forum in which those kinds of studies, discussions could be had, and to create a cadre, a community of scholars, practitioners, maybe some policymakers who could have these fruitful discussions to move the trajectory of our field forward in a thoughtful manner, and to groom future, graduate students and future early career individuals to do great work in the field that can resonate and solve some of the issues or inform some of the issues that are most pressing in education. So I think we started this discussion around 2014, 2015, and launched in 2016. We started with the required 75 signatures, and we're up to about 230, 250 members. That's a substantial growth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when you think about the vision of the SIG moving forward, what do you see as those most pressing initiatives or the next steps that the SIG should be taking at this point?
Ooh, tough question there. I mean, to me, it's to continue to grow the young scholars so that they understand the importance of data and can carry this message forward. Understanding the need for different methodologies and working with practitioners to hear their needs. To me, if we don't have impact with educators, it's not just about getting a special issue out, which we've done through the SIG a couple of times, or having special sessions. It's about impacting educational practice in a significant way through our work and through that kind of collaboration. So that research practitioner partnership, I think, is very important. Why we have a professional development person advising us, why we have educators advising us from school districts, from state departments of education, and having budding scholars who can continue this work.
You know, you had mentioned this connection between researchers and practitioners. What is it that you feel like, you know, what you've learned from practitioners in the field, what are their voices telling us in terms of what we need to be doing as a research community to meet their needs as practitioners in the use of data?
That's a very timely and relevant question. And I'll use as an example, I just got off a call with some people from a State Department of Education where we're doing consulting on data literacy and continuous improvement. And in this work, what we're hearing is the pain and realities of the recovery from the pandemic and how data can inform, but data only goes so far as if they're actionable and useful and relevant. They understand some of the issues, in this case, they call them the pillars of recovery. The question is, how do we get viable solutions to help them recover from this horror and continuing the horrible situation that has decimated education over the past almost 2 years now? Data can help, data can inform. To me, the biggest challenge is to help in the reality and the complexity of the educational situation right now, because we're going to lose fabulous educators simply because it's the most challenging situation anyone could possibly face.
Well, throughout your career, you've made significant contributions to the field of data-informed decision-making. As you reflect on your experiences, what advice do you have for graduate students or early career scholars interested in pursuing research on educational data use?
Well, first of all, thank you for that compliment. This is something I learned from one of my mentors who told me that you can publish, but unless you have impact in the real world, then your career only goes so far. So I would tell young scholars to think very deeply about the needs of educators. Listen to them. Hear the situations, the concerns that they face on a daily basis, and think very broadly, very creatively about how data can inform. Data are not the panacea. They're not the end all, they're not the total solution. But as long as educators understand the needs of and the complexities of each and every child and how those data can help inform about their interests, their backgrounds, the home situations, it doesn't mean that they have control of them, but they can inform the decisions they make on a day-to-day basis. I think about very deep words that a scholar that I completely respect, David Berliner, said in an AERA presentation back in 2005, "Don't blame teachers for things that are beyond their control." And that really resonated with me. Having data can help educators only go so far. It provides the evidence and the credence for what they're doing. But unless they take into consideration the whole situation of a child, they're not going to go far enough. So listen to your heart, listen to the educators, and it will help inform, but also listen to the data too.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your continued contributions to the field. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
Yes, thank you for that question. The Data SIG is a group of wonderful individuals, diverse individuals. The more we can involve current scholars, future scholars, and other surrounding people to understand the importance of data, because unfortunately what happens all too often is that data gets short shrifted. If you go to a school district, oh, well, we can't expend monies on data. We've got a new curriculum, we've got a new textbook, we've got this issue or that issue. Data are fundamental to all educational practice, whether it is a test score, whether it's transportation data, socio-emotional data. The number of times of late I've heard about the importance of understanding socio-emotional situations of both students and teachers in the wake of the pandemic. Unless we can solve those foundational issues, we can't even begin to address like the learning loss that has been created by the pandemic. So my parting words is data are more than test scores, data are diverse, children are complex. In order to address the needs of all learners and all educators, we have to think broadly about what data are and how to use them both effectively and responsibly.
Well, thank you so much for those insights. More information about Dr. Mandinach's work can be found using the information provided on your screen. To stay up to date on the work of the Data-Driven Decision-Making in Education SIG, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay tuned as we continue to highlight the work of scholars and practitioners in our monthly Spotlight video series.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.